Hello, and welcome back to the World of Wysteria. Tonight, I will be reading Chapter 17. Wysteria, Chapter 17. Will considered trying to hop or skip, or whatever he'd done last night, bouncing from one location to another through the void. But anxious to continue his conversation with Jeremy, he decided to try going directly to the castle, to wake up there. He'd been able to find his way to Emily by focusing on her image. Using the same method, shouldn't he be able to land in a particular predetermined location in Wysteria? It certainly would be convenient, he thought. Before letting go of the waking world, Will envisioned himself standing within the paneled walls of his chamber in the keep. Then, with the image impressed in his mind, he sank into the darkness. When his consciousness returned and the curtain of black lifted, Will stood where he'd last imagined himself, his room in the castle. His theory was correct, or at least not disproven, for it seemed it was possible to determine where he entered his world. Good, he thought. He was saved a walk today, possibly a long one. And unless his emergence here was no more than a fortunate coincidence, he'd unlocked a new ability. Fully present in mind and body, Will scanned the room, then glanced out onto the balcony. This was his room, not a newly created copy, and it appeared he was alone. Though he looked forward to seeing Emily, he hoped Jeremy would arrive before her. Surely she would ask him what Jeremy had to say during their secret conversation last night, and Will wasn't certain how he should answer. He decided to wait on the balcony, hoping he might catch a glimpse of the water nymph. But as he turned and began crossing the floor, something caught his eye. An object on the small table near the fireplace, next to Jeremy's chair. Walking over to get a closer look, he saw it was the pipe Jeremy had set there last night. He must have forgotten it, he said, picking up the foreign artifact and examining it. Yes, said a voice from behind him. I left it here. Will turned his head and saw Jeremy stepping into the room from the balcony. Quite by accident, Jeremy continued, coming over to join him. I only just realized it was missing. I would hate to lose it. It has much sentimental value. It's strange, holding something from another world, said Will, staring at the pipe. It feels very old. Yes, he replied, it is. Did you know I was here? Will asked, handing Jeremy his pipe. Jeremy looked puzzled. I'm not sure I understand the question. The timing of your arrival. I just got here a minute ago, he explained. Is it just a coincidence, or did you somehow know I was here? I merely arrived at the proper time, said Jeremy. But I'm here a little early tonight, so you arrived at the proper time as well. So I guess Emily is late, Will jokingly remarked. No, replied Jeremy. Emily will be here when she should be. which I imagine will be soon. So we should talk. He motioned toward the seats in front of them. Shall we? They both sat, Jeremy taking his chair next to the hearth, Will again choosing the love seat opposite him. Yes, Jeremy murmured, fondling his pipe. I would hate to lose it. He leaned forward and placed it on the low table that sat between them, stared at it for a moment, then looked up at Will. Is that your wish? He asked. Will was mystified. My wish? To travel, said Jeremy, to leave your world and enter the dream universe beyond. Is that your wish? Will realized he was referring to Emily's parting question last night. Do you believe it's possible? He asked. Anything is possible, Jeremy replied. But you must be sure. So I will ask again. Is that your wish? Well, I'd love to travel with Emily. And I'm curious to see other worlds, yours, for example, he said. But as a result, would my connection to Wysteria be lost? No, said Jeremy. If you wish to venture from your world, you must loosen the connection, slacken the line, so to speak. But it can never be severed. Then I couldn't be snatched, he asked. Not from here, Jeremy answered. Nor do I believe you could be kept from your world if you did leave her borders. Which is why it would be beneficial. For whom, Will asked. The safest place for Emily is here with you, except for my world, of course, where she would be invulnerable, he replied. But she cannot remain locked within these walls indefinitely. And wherever she might travel, she would be safer if you were there with her. That settled the matter. Then yes, I do wish to travel, Will told him. Good, said Jeremy, staring down at the table in front of him. So, how do I go about it? Will asked, assuming that Jeremy had some plan in mind, some guidance or direction. We'll discuss that when Emily comes, he answered. She'll be very excited, said Will. He then thanked Jeremy for his willingness to help them. I would hold your thanks, Jeremy said to him, with an impish smile in his eye. You may curse me before the day is through. Will was about to question him further when he suddenly caught Emily's scent. She's here, he said. Close. In the castle, I think. Yes, she is, said Jeremy. You see, she is right on time. What should I do if she asks about our conversation? Will inquired. I don't want to lie to her, even if it's for her own good. I do not intend to lie, Will, he replied, and neither should you. Lies are dangerous, for they create a false reality. Will then heard a quiet knock at the doorway. Turning his head, he saw Emily standing at the entrance to the room. Don't tell me you two have been up all night talking, she said. No, said Will, as both men rose from their chairs. We just got here. Am I interrupting? She asked. Not at all, Jeremy answered. Will and I were just discussing whether or not we should lie to you." "Oh?" said Emily, with an uneasy grin. "And what have you decided?" she asked, looking at Will, who made a conscious effort not to look as mortified as he felt. Jeremy simply laughed. "How was your day, my dear?" he asked. "Okay," she replied, "although I was just killing time." "I see," said Jeremy. "Anxious to see your sweetheart?" "Of course," she said, blushing as she cast a quick glance at Will. "But also—" "Yes, Emily, I have given your question thought," he said to her. "And?" "And it's a lovely day outside." Jeremy turned and proceeded to walk toward the balcony. Emily looked at Will, who smiled sheepishly and shrugged his shoulders. They then both followed their eccentric friend, joining hands as their paths converged. "She is beautiful," said Jeremy, staring into the chasm. "Is she here?" Will asked, as he and Emily stepped up to the railing next to him. "Of course," he answered, "though in her watery guise, not her more confining human form. Now that she has taken up residence here, will she appear again in that form, as a woman?" said Will. "If it pleases her," Jeremy replied. "It could be tomorrow, or years from now. Centuries, perhaps. But your fairy may reveal herself to you if you call her by name." Will saw a problem here. "You told me that in order to learn her name, I should ask her," he said. "I did," said Jeremy. "But how can I ask her unless I can talk to her? And how can I talk to her unless I can call her? And how can I call her unless I know her name?" "Yes, quite a quandary you find yourself in," Jeremy responded, whereupon Emily tried, with only partial success, to stifle a giggle. Will waited a moment, hoping he would explain how the vicious circle might be broken. But Jeremy seemed perfectly satisfied with his response. Will, however, wasn't. "Do I just have to wait, perhaps for years, and hope she happens to show herself?" he asked. "I suppose that's one approach," said Jeremy absently. "It's up to you, Will. I've given you my advice." As Will was about to speak, still in pursuit of a straight answer, he felt Emily give his hand a light squeeze, which he took as an expression of her sympathy, as well as a signal that it was best to let the subject go. "So, what is it that you two are going to lie to me about?" Emily asked. "Or is that a silly question?" "I believe we decided not to lie to you," Jeremy replied. "But that will wait." He took a few steps away from the railing and began walking back and forth in front of them, his eyes fixed on the ground, while Will and Emily patiently waited for him to gather his thoughts and, presumably, continue. "Last night," he began, continuing to pace, "you asked me about traveling, about Will traveling. And, as I said, I have considered the matter. What Will experienced was intriguing, an emerging talent perhaps, something that might evolve on its own, something I should not concern myself with, ordinarily. Circumstances are such, however, that I am willing to give you my assistance. He stopped and looked at Emily. If you wish, he added. Yes, of course, she said. That is, if Will and I have spoken. So you think I don't know, Emily, he said, cutting her off again. I have an idea, a plan, if you will. But you both must do exactly as I say. Do you understand? He asked, looking each of them in the eye. Yes, they pronounced, nearly in unison. Very well, said Jeremy, nodding solemnly. He then stepped closer to the couple, who stood with their backs to the balustrade. The plan is to bring you both together to my world. Really? Said Emily. You can do that? I can assist you, he replied. I can help open the door for you, nudge you in the right direction. But you two must make the journey on your own. I cannot promise this plan will work. I may be wrong. However, it has no chance of success unless you follow my instructions. Emily, you must attempt to bring Will with you to my world. You know how this is done, but the timing is critical. Will cannot be wrested directly from Wysteria, even voluntarily. He must be between worlds. Will, you must let go of this place, but you cannot return to the waking world. You must linger between worlds for as long as possible, and you must stay connected to Emily. Do you both understand your tasks? He asked. I think so, said Emily. I will try to drag Will with me to your world. Yes, but not until he has passed into the dark, he told her. This is crucial, Emily, and it may be difficult. It will require presence of mind and patience. Jeremy then turned to Will. And you? I am to leave Wysteria, but not wake up. Though Will understood what he was to do, he had no idea how he was to do it. Yes, said Jeremy, let go of everything except for her. Oh, Will, said Emily, clutching his arm with both hands and bouncing on the balls of her feet. Isn't this exciting? Will smiled and patted her on the shoulder. Are we going to try later today, when I'm getting tired? He asked Jeremy. I assume that would make it easier. Tired? No, we cannot wait till then, he said. If you are sleepy, the pull of the waking world will be too strong. This will be challenging enough as it is. Are you ready? Jeremy asked them, taking another step closer. Emily took Will's hand. Yes, she answered. Will had assumed he'd be given more information about the plan before they actually made the attempt. He'd never tried to leave Wysteria while fully awake, and he still didn't understand what Jeremy's role in this was going to be. "I guess so," he said. "But what exactly—" "Good," said Jeremy, settling the matter. "I will be waiting with the door open, and I hope to see you there shortly." "Are you leaving?" Emily asked him. "Remember," Jeremy continued, "both of you, stay connected. Do not let go." He reached out his arms, placing one hand on Will's shoulder, the other on Emily's. "Bon voyage," he said, suddenly thrusting them backwards, sending them over the railing and into the abyss. And we will continue shortly with Chapter 18.